Hey everybody, and welcome to IndieQuest, the celebration of the indie and obscure. I'm one of your hosts, Josh, also known as Frantic. I'm here with a few good people that I love to chat with, and one I'm like, he's alright. What's up, Steve? How are you?
I'm gonna just make the bold assumption I'm one of the people you like to chat with.
Yeah.
I certainly hope so. Life is good. I think I set the record today for the fastest grocery shopping run I've ever done.
Oh, yeah.
I had about 40 minutes or so to get all of our groceries and back here, which is why I'm a little winded as I sit here and talk to you, but winded with is the exact right amount of bell peppers in my fridge, so no concerns there. But otherwise life is good. Coffee in hand, all's going well. But what I really want to know is how Drachma's life is going, buddy. How's your day?
My life is going very well. It's much brighter out. That we were talking about it beforehand, but had to comment on that because daylight savings flipped over. I don't know if it's on or off. I'm thinking it's on. Is it on now? I don't know how it works exactly.
I don't like it. I like when it gets dark at like 3.
Yeah, same.
Me too. I do like that. Yeah. But now I'm really wondering, what is the exact right amount of bell peppers to have in your fridge?
It's 3, 1 green, 1 red, 1 yellow.
No orange in there.
Buddy, at $2.99 a bell pepper, I can't be splurging every week. Come on. I got a kid on the way.
Got to skimp on the orange. I got you.
Yeah.
But that will lead us into, we actually have a guest again. A guest that some might recognize.
You said that like, whoa.
Yeah, I know.
I can't believe someone else agreed
Someone
to it.
said
we
yes.
have at least 5 friends. So
Yep.
with that, Caleb J. Ross, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing really, really well. I'm a little concerned about maybe your mental health, Seth, because it sucks that Josh doesn't like talking to you. And it's a bit of a problem for you. And if you need to talk, that's cool. I'm here for you. You know.
Mm-hmm. No, I just left that open for interpretation. Just you guys can fight it out. You know.
I picked up what you were very consciously laying down.
Okay.
Yeah, the subtext was the text there. I think we can all agree.
No, I'm doing great. I'm excited to talk with you guys. I'm a big fan of the show. Listen to it all the time. And I've got my Topo Chico to drink here. Topo Chico, which is the bubbliest of all waters. So that's perfect for a nice podcast recording here. I'm going to be burping up a storm. Probably.
Yeah, I got
that.
NOS, because family.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, iced Americano as always, but I did buy my Topo Chicos at the grocery store today.
So no.
If you haven't given the twist of lime flavor a go, do it. It's delicious.
It's a 10.
You just got to have that beverage talk at the beginning,
Yeah.
That's how it goes.
It's a main quest beverage for sure. For sure.
Oh,
Well, yeah, I'm doing great. Thank you guys for inviting me. I'm really excited to talk about this game, at least kind of sort of 3 games.
yeah, for sure. Before we roll into some of your history on the series, Caleb, why don't you tell everyone, I guess, who you are and what you do on Polymedia?
Yeah, I definitely will. So I'm Caleb J. Ross, as you mentioned. The J is only there because there was another Caleb Ross who's in movies and stuff or something. And back in my early life, when I had high hopes and dreams of becoming a famous author, I figured I should probably have a J in there to separate myself out. And now it just kind of stuck, so it's there. So yeah, I at Polymedia I co-host Tales of the Lesser Medium with Travis. It's a podcast about video game narratives. We tell the stories of video games. We tell them with side helpings of hilarity, I think. Hopefully, people laugh. They're really fun. We just got through winding up an episode on Earthbound, which was really fun. Probably one of my more fun ones that we recorded. But that's been great. And I'm also we're just starting a new initiative. I think maybe depending on when this episode goes first, it'll probably be like the first sort of public sort of announcement of it, I guess. But we're starting an initiative at Polymedia for a book imprint. So I'm actually writing a book that will be published under Polymedia, which is really exciting, and exciting not just for me, but exciting for Polymedia, because it's like a new testing thing. We're like, will this work? Will people like it? I don't know. Let's see. And so I'm excited to be a part of that.
Heck yeah. That leads me really nicely into the sort of obligation question we always have for everyone who comes on and guests is, what's your favorite indie game? And in your case, this has got to be the easiest question to answer of all time. But take the stage. Answer.
Yep. One of the same. My favorite game, end of statements, period, is What Remains of Edith Finch. I'm a huge walking simulator fan in general. I hate hard, difficult games. I like games that you really can't win or lose. You just kind of experience. And What Remains of Edith Finch is definitely that. So yeah, that's actually the topic of the book that I'm writing is all about my time with What Remains of Edith Finch. How I felt about it. All this, it just captivated me in a way that no other game has ever. Not even really come close. It's been my number one for a very long time. I want to say the only more recent game that's gotten even a little bit close was Ghost of Tsushima, but that's not an indie, so we won't talk about it.
Mm-hmm. Do you still track all of your games in a giant list of how much you love them? Do you so if I said, what are your top 3 indie games? Do you just have that data at your fingertips right now to tell me?
I pretty much do. Yeah, I have a window open right now. Let me get to that. Vamp for me for 2 seconds here.
This is on the spot. I gave him literally no warning other than the fact that I respect a man that goes hard on data. All right.
Yes.
And the idea of every single time you finish a game, you rank it in an ever evolving list is mad scientist stuff that I love.
I do, and the ranking is also incredibly. If you think about it and really try to break it down, it's incredibly arbitrary and meaningless because I have a few weird rules where I don't ever move a game once I put it in there. And so I'm only ranking games according to what already exists as games that I'm that I've ranked in the past. So I could look back at some of these games and be like, that's weird that I put that there. But that's just what I do. So yeah, out of the completed it looks like 261 games, I have them all just 1 through 261 of what I liked them. So indie games. Let me go through here real quick. So top 1, What Remains of Edith Finch. Inside is number 11.
Ooh.
And then Limbo is number 12 because those are right next to each other. So yeah, that's pretty much. Oh, The Beginner's Guide is number 4. I have to shout out The Beginner's Guide because it's one of the greatest games ever. It's my number 19, and it's one that not enough people talk about. So
heck yeah,
there you go.
So there's a little sense of Caleb's taste. He likes Play Dead, and he really likes What Remains of Edith Finch.
Yeah. So I like a surreal, weird, sort of visceral game. I guess all of those probably fit into that to some degree. Also, games that break the fourth wall. I love that as well. So there you go.
You would think that it would make sense that we would be bringing you on for the What Remains of Edith Finch episode. But in fact, we instead brought you on for a game that is the 3rd game in a trilogy that you'd never played, if I'm recalling correctly.
Never played and barely even heard of. In fact, the first time I heard about it, I think you guys talked about listening to the live version at MagFest of the song To the Moon. That was the first time I'd even heard the title of the game, I think, unless I'd already been playing it during that session, but I don't think I started playing it.
No.
I don't think you guys asked me to come here until after that.
Right. So I like to think that I influenced Caleb to play these games because it was myself, him.
I think you're correct.
And our buddy Ross. We're all standing there watching those two perform Everything's All Right in To the Moon. And I leaned over to Caleb and said, "You'd like this game." And then he said, "Yeah, I probably would." And then, a couple weeks later, beat To the Moon. And then kind of got the idea, this is very much in Caleb's wheelhouse and would be a good conversation, I think. So that's why Caleb's here.
You were absolutely correct on all fronts.
Cool.
Yes. Thank you for showing me the light.
Yes.
Awesome.
So
cool. No, cool. So, we are going to talk all things Imposter Factory, the 3rd game from this. I guess it's a trilogy, but I don't really know that it is. We'll get into that later. It's an illogy, certainly. It's an ongoing illogy. Mm-hmm. But before we do, folks that have listened to the podcast for a long time certainly know our 3 opinions on To the Moon and Finding Paradise. I think it would be fair to say that we had glowing reviews, but you know what? We like fresh perspectives around here. So I'm curious, Caleb, what's your experience with the first 2 games? Obviously, we know how you just found out about To the Moon, but what's your experience with those first 2 and kind of your general feelings on that first handful of games?
Yeah, so I played the first 2, the first one, To the Moon, then Finding Paradise immediately following it. So I played them one right after another. In my head, the games are the conceit of those two games are essentially the same, and I think of them almost as just like version 1 and version 2 of the same game. They really could be. In a lot of ways, it seems like the games have taken this template. Those two games specifically have taken this very specific, peculiar template and said, let's just add a different story onto it. So I think of them in the same headspace, and so it'd be kind of hard to tease out like which one I like better, which one I like worse, which maybe we can still force us all to do later on in the episode. But so yeah, as sort of a story-driven, very linear experience that kind of does a lot of interesting things at a very sort of basic level, I really appreciated them. So maybe what I can do is I'll give like a quick like 2-minute like here's sort of the conceit, and then I can tell you what I liked about them and what I didn't. And I promise I'll be short. Someone time me. Hopefully, I talk a lot, but hopefully time me. Make sure I don't go too far on this. So the conceit being basically that there's these two doctors that work for this company called Sigmund, and they have a machine that allows people who are on their deathbed to be tricked, so to speak, into feeling as though they lived their best life. It allows them to sort of grant their dying wish in a way that modifies their historical memories, like the very kernel of their earliest memories, modifies those memories so that in their own brain, that memory then seeds additional memories and therefore a lifelong of a life spent doing what it was that they wish they had done the entire time. And so you play these doctors that kind of go into the brain and tinker with it a little bit. It's kind of like what's the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie from the 80s where
Total
he
Recall?
It's like Total Recall, but fun and funny and cute kind of thing. So it kind of there's a lot of weird similarities there. But yeah, in terms of what I liked about them, I really, really liked that these games went so hard into humor. In a way that I was not expecting. When you hear the name To the Moon and you hear sort of the description of the games, you sort of feel like it's going to be way up. They're going to be games that are like way up their own butt. And I personally love a game that's way up its own butt, so that would not have detracted me at all. But I was really, really pleasantly surprised at how humorous these games were, and I felt like that allowed them to explore these kind of really deep topics in a way that didn't like drag the player down at all. And I especially like in the humor aspect of it. And the reason I'm harping on humor so much is because as we get started talking about Imposter Factory, it'll probably come back up. But I love that this game, it's almost these first two games, they're almost like in so many times they go out of their way to set up a situation that they can offer a punchline to that they didn't need to. A good example is there's I think it's in the second game. There's someone who you talk to and who goes onto an elevator as you're talking to her on a phone, and she makes a comment about like she's late because she has to wait for the elevator. Unlike you, the protagonist of the game, the elevator's always just showing up for you, and that's a trope in video games that you don't really think about. Like, oh yeah, I never have to wait for elevators. But the only reason that the character you're talking to on the phone went into an elevator and that whole scene was played out visually is so that they could make that joke. And that kind of thing happens so often in these first two games that really just sort of made me fall in love with them. So yeah, I'm high on the first two games for sure.
Would
Awesome.
you, if you could, since you're here, right? Would you have put the two of them on the main quest if you had the opportunity to do so?
Yeah, I think so. The only reason I hesitated is because if I had to choose, like, I've already, I guess, established that both of the games are kind of the same game. And while there are parts of, I think, the second one that I didn't like as much as the first one, I think as a whole, they are main quest fodder. If I had to break them down, I might have to be argued to get Finding Paradise into the main quest. But because I think of them the same, I'll say yeah. Because if you're playing one, you really should play the other. Like, you shouldn't just leave off after. It'd be like watching a third of a movie.
Yeah.
Like, you just need to keep going with it.
Yeah, I'm happy that I think that I remember when we did our Finding Paradise review, I was the only one that still said To the Moon was my favorite of the two. I think the other two co-hosts said they preferred Finding Paradise, so I'm happy not.
That's because they're dumb.
No,
so
I mean,
simple.
Yeah, fair.
One reason, but I mean, I'm happy that somebody else has maybe a similar perspective. I personally, for me, I think To the Moon's story resonated a little bit more than Finding Paradise, and I think that's all about the experiences you've had, I suppose. So,
Yeah, and I think one of the things they do really well too, and I think both of the games did this really well, is because, and I think the humor plays into this a little bit, and that's they're setting up this situation that is a mystery. It's a mystery situation because you're asking not only what these people's dying wish are, which is sort of the impetus to the entire both games, is you're trying to figure out what this person's dying wish even is, and then trying to artifact or articulate a fake world in which they can sort of live that out. But what I really liked about it is because there's this like overarching puzzle and everything. The doctors, though, don't really treat it as that much of a challenge. They're sort of just there like, oh yeah, this is easy, we'll figure it out. And they just kind of have fun with it along the way. And so that leaves the player then to sort of be free to think, well, if it's that easy to figure out, then maybe I can figure out what's going on. Like maybe I can start piecing things together. And so they put you in this headspace of like, I'm going to figure out the puzzle before it even happens. I'm going to be super smart. But on both games, they go in places that no way were you expecting where they would go, and they still resolve very, very well. Like that's what I loved about it, is they sort of dodge those laser beams of like being a little bit too like jumping the shark, but then also like keeping tethered to reality in a way that like you just didn't expect. And so I was really surprised by those in those first two games.
Heck yeah. Well, I'm glad that we have brought together a panel of 4 confirmed enjoyers of To the Moon and Finding Paradise. Do you fellas want to get into some high-level discussion on Imposter Factory? So for folks that have never listened to one of our kind of like game breakdown episodes, this will be very similar, where we're going to, I think, kind of touch on opinions, high-level synopsis, non-spoilery type things. And then we'll give you some sort of cutoff. We'll let you know when the meat and potatoes is really going to hit and spoilers are coming, so you can abandon ship, play it, and then promise to come back after you've played it, because it would be very rude to just leave us half played in your podcatching app of choice. The only way I would forgive you in that circumstance is if you left us a 5-star review. So, with that said, Imposter Factory. Overall, do one of you feel confident in breaking down sort of the high-level setup and scenario for this game?
Josh?
This one's a little more complicated than the other two, I would say, somehow. You know what I mean? But really, the conceit of the game, I would say, just going in, is it's a murder mystery at first. That's what you're going in, like, okay, there's a murder. Who did the murder? And you're going into memories trying to solve this murder. That's basically how it starts. But then it kind of takes a different turn later on, which I won't spoil now. But you play Quincy. This is the main character. It's a totally new character that you've never been introduced to before. And throughout the entire game, the question is, who is this guy? Why am I in his memories? What is going on? It's literally, the entire game is a mystery in and of itself to solve through the storyline. And I think that this one is just mostly narrative. Like, there isn't like any little mini games or anything. The main puzzle you do is just go from room to room and talk to people and get little orbs to go to the next room and talk to people. So it's really point A to point B, trying to just get through the story to see what they're kind of like almost building, like a to the moon universe here with this game, I would say, a little bit. But yeah, that's pretty much, without going into spoilers, it's just really hard to go any deeper than that. It's a murder mystery with the same type of writing that you come to expect from To the Moon and Finding Paradise.
I gotta say, it took a remarkable amount of restraint for you to say To the Moon universe and not To the Mooniverse.
To the Mooniverse.
like big credit to you. So yeah, for anyone who has played the first two, which I literally do not play this if you have not played the first two.
Yeah.
Play the first two and then play this. There's a lot of parts of this that feel very similar to those other games, and then there's some parts that are very different, as Josh was kind of alluding to. I mean, in like the look and feel, like this is very much still in that, like, this sounds more derivative than I mean, but like it is in that like RPG Maker style. Or derogatory.
I think it was actually made with the RPG Maker engine.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think this one maybe is like a little notch above visually compared to the other two, but it might just be that I don't know. Maybe just the various scenes that they did were like more densely packed or something. I don't know if there's any technical weight behind that at all. But it controls very similarly. You know, it has the same, like, you're walking around as if this is a 16-bit RPG talking to characters. It has sort of the high-level flow of the other games, but like notably what you're doing is a lot more streamlined. So in the other games, you were hopping into a memory, and your goal was to kind of like find the linking object from that memory to the next one, which resulted in a lot of you like point and clicking around, clicking on different objects, basically anything that was a weird color or seemed out of place. You'd be like, I better click on that because that might be one of these little colored orbs that you would fill up, and that would let you then jump from that object that links the two memories into a memory further back in the past. In this game, that whole setup is not there. Like, you do not start this game playing as the two doctors from the first two games. You start as these two new characters, like Josh said. You are still doing that hop through a story. You're actually following it like from childhood forward in this case, as opposed to leaping backwards slowly over time. And you are still navigating like memory to memory, but there's really no like explore, like no seek, no find, no hunt for these different pieces. It's basically you walk into like the first floor of a house or something, and maybe there's a scene in the living room, there's a scene in the kitchen, there's a scene in the bedroom. Each one of those three different little scenes are going to give you a little bit of story. They're going to give you one of the like orbs, and then you'll just walk through a door into the next scene. It is the friction of that has been completely filed off. And I think to this game's benefit and to the pacing, the one thing that I think we in general have been kind of critical on is the inclusion of the mini games when hopping from memory to memory. They're like you said, Josh, they're gone, which I really appreciated. Like they were fine. The mini games to me always felt so easy that they were like kind of insulting, and I was like, why am I even really doing this? And it felt out of place. So I was happy to see those gone, and I think that this game, as a result, like updates its pacing and has a much improved pacing compared to, especially Finding Paradise, which of the three maybe felt the most like choppy or blocky at times. So I felt like the whole way through was a very smooth experience.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think, to the benefit of the narrative, where you kind of like you're just flowing through the story. You're just getting new details, trying to piece everything together in your head. Well, I talked to this person. What does this mean about this thing? You know, and you still have that internal puzzle in your head, but like you said, there's less friction throughout the entire game. And I do think that it does have like a nice, like, it's almost like a nice little 3 to 4 hour bite-sized like story that's just really nice to experience and really hard to put down once you start because of that, you know, like you're just going and discovering everything. So.
Yeah,
very much so.
I'd call this the Final Fantasy X of Freebird games.
Dude.
Hallway simulator.
Wait, is that an insult? How do you feel about Final Fantasy X?
That was a jab aimed directly at you.
Oh, I was like, I felt like you were my people for a moment there.
Because there's absolutely so. I don't really think it's a knock, and I don't really think even it's a knock against Final Fantasy X, but it's extremely linear to the point where there is no choice. I mean, there was no choice in the first two games either, really. I mean, you were gonna go the same direction no matter what, but in this one, sometimes you can barely even turn left or right. It is just straightforward, right? So, I mean, it's not a knock on the game. I think that it proves that the other two games could have easily had an hour shaved off of them, and you still got the same experience because there was no filler, no fluff. It was a clean 4 hours, and you got everything you needed out of this game. So
that's fair. You know, I will say, maybe as a result of that streamlining, in this game, I did a lot less like just clicking on the various objects in the rooms and the environments. I don't even really know how much flavor text they included for some of those things. Like, it's very possible that there was a lot of like little jokes and things that I didn't even really see, because I would say, especially after the first like 45 minutes or so, when I sort of like my wheels clicked into the track that this game was on, and I realized how like streamlined it was going to be, I didn't even, no poking. I was just like, yeah, all right, I'm on, you take me where you want me to go, and I'll trust you. I never looked around. But in those first little bit, there were a couple times where they had jokes there, so I don't know.
I came into the game with my poke lever already turned to the off side, because like I think in the first two games, I realized pretty quickly that there are some flavor text in some areas, but the flavor text didn't actually give me any additional tools to do anything else with. They were sort of trying to be almost like collectibles in a way, but they weren't collectibles that really helped. And even the menu, the inventory screen on the first two games, there's like an item screen, but there was never a single time in the whole game to even look at it. It was kind of almost just a way to say, here's some things that you found. And so I kind of like went into this game. I went into it like with a couple different perspectives. One was I just went into it going, I'm just going to beeline the thing because I know that's what the previous two games have taught me. That's really what's important. So I'm going to do that anyway. And then also just the fact that it came into the game completely differently than the other two. Like for the first sort of, I don't know, I guess maybe hour or so of the game, I was wondering, like, is this even part of the trilogy? Like, that's how different it is, right? Because the first two games, it's very obvious that you're the same characters, your same situation, same conceit. This one, it is so different to what Josh was saying. Like, it's so completely different that I kept having to question, like, is it part of the same universe? Is it part of this thing? I don't really know. And obviously that gets resolved as you continue throughout the game. But I spent a lot of time just wondering if I was meant to know some of these people or any of these things, and that was a little bit frustrating, I suppose. But ultimately, I fell into it. I think the game, though, it has, and maybe part of that frustration too was that I feel like in the first two games, like there was a mystery, but again, as I alluded to earlier, the mystery was accepted by everyone, accepted by the characters, accepted by the doctors. Like there was a known mystery, if that makes sense. In this case, there was in the case of Imposter Factory, the mystery is not knowing what the mystery is, and so there was no like single character that you could truly latch onto. Right. You do learn pretty quickly, pretty early in the game. This isn't a spoiler, but you do learn pretty quickly early in the game that there's a character named Linry who seems to know a little bit more about what's going on than you do, and that's the first time you get a character that's like, oh, I can grab onto this character and sort of use them as my guide pole, but you still are embodying the character that doesn't know what's going on, and that can be really, really, really hard to do. And I just didn't find it as enjoyable, I guess, as the first two, and from that particular respect. But yeah,
I mean, I think I felt the same way because it's like sometimes I'm just really bad with names. I'm like, is there a name in here, like some person that I'm like that I should know who that is? Like, is that person, like this random person I'm talking to, is that a name that has came up and I just completely spaced on the name? Yeah, that happened to me like 3 or 4 times, but it does have a nice like button at the end where you're like, okay, I get it. But like there is probably a good over half of this game where you're like, what is even going on here? You know, so.
Yeah, that literal thing happened to us when we first started. And in like the first half hour where you're controlling Quincy, I was talking with my partner and she and I both were like, should we know who Quincy is? Like,
right.
Quincy's obviously not one of the main doctors, but like, is this like the name of the kid from the guy in the second game? And I've forgotten that kid's name.
Yeah,
like, I don't know if this character has come up before or not. And then I, too afraid to Google it because I'm going to Google something and reveal the end of the game. So I was completely unaware. But no, for anyone who's starting this game, don't worry. They're just new characters. You're just enjoying new people.
Yeah. And it's like it's not a secret. This is part of the series. Like they have like a bullet point. This is like what, episode 3-ish with some side stories, So like the developers are out there like this is part of the story. So don't worry about that going in. But like that was something like that did bother me too that I noticed. But how about do you guys want to talk about what our thoughts are just generally on the game in comparison to the other ones? Yeah.
Yeah, why don't you kick us off?
All right, cool. I think the story was really well done. I enjoyed it quite a bit. I would say this is probably my least favorite of the 3. I'll just go and say that at the top here. I love the execution of the story. I think it plays out really well. But I think there's just something missing. There's something about it that didn't quite hit me in the feels. I did tear up and had the emotional moments like the first 2, but it didn't hit me like with that gut punch ending or anything like that like the other 2 did. And I think that's just missing from this game for me. So I loved it. I think it's a great game, but that's what when I finished up and rolled credits on this, that's pretty much my feeling on it after everything.
I'll go last, I think, with my opinions, because I have a feeling my opinion might be different than the two of you. So you guys, Steve, you go ahead.
Yeah.
I mean, this is not a video medium, but I will say Seth is bringing this real kind of like gonna crack his knuckles energy, like this real like leaning against a brick wall down the alley energy today, where I'm like, damn, if I make a joke that doesn't land, he might clock me. I like it. This is I'm a little nervous. Overall, I think that this game, it's very good. You know, it actually, it kind of feels like it's in an unwinnable position here. So it is the third game in the To the Moon series. And I think just the simple act of saying that brings expectations. And especially because the first two games were relatively formulaic and like really had a very similar structure, pacing. They were doing very similar things, different themes, but also the same themes at the same time, depending on how you look at it. Mm-hmm. And so to say that game is like that, it's a different vibe, and I think intentionally.
Yeah.
Like there's still some emotional moments and things like that, but it is not trying to be the third recreation of that same experience you've already had. And so that can leave you feeling a little like, oh, well, that wasn't what I was expecting. But on the flip side, they have to tell you that it's the third game in this series, because if they don't, then the like sort of ultimate points that the story builds towards will mean nothing to a new player. So it's almost like I there probably is a great way to write your way out of that box, but I feel like they were just in a really difficult position. But isolated, taken on its own, right. I think this was like I mentioned before, it is the best pacing of one of these games. I think like it clicks along very smoothly. I think that the writing itself is the best that the writing has been. Now, there are some parts of that you could say, depending on what you like about the writing in the first two games, you could disagree with. Like, this game doesn't joke around quite as much. It does have jokes, but maybe not quite as many. But I think that the writing feels very natural, very human. Like, it feels like very much like people having conversations, which I thought was good. And yeah, all in all, I was very, very satisfied with my time with it. I would main quest it personally. Yeah. I think like you, Josh, I would probably put it as the third of the three,
right? Maybe,
but it would be with a huge caveat, because I would not just leave it there. I'd be like, yeah, this is maybe my third of the three, but something has to be at the bottom, and it's kind of unfair,
right? I wasn't trying to like lead off with a negative like opinion. Like, this game is fantastic. Like, all three of these games are like super, like they're very well done. This is just my least favorite, but that's least favorite of three fantastic, wonderful games that touched me, you know, a lot, many times in inappropriate places, you know. But yeah. All right, Caleb, what you got? How do you feel about this one?
I don't feel an obligation to love it.
Yeah.
I feel like you were set up for failure.
I also know. No, I also know that this is there's a couple things that I'm keeping in mind as I get ready to say what I think. One, I know IndieQuest is a positive place. Okay, positivity rules, and so I want to be positive. Two, I think some of the issues I had with this game are probably going to go into spoiler territory, so I'll probably save like some of the bigger issues I had for it until later. But to be spoiler free, I think the game. I came away not really liking it that much, which surprised me because I did like the first two games so much. But I think the first two games were variations on a theme that I felt could be explored with other games. And I feel like with other new versions of that same conceit, like taking that conceit and exploring it different ways, I feel like that could have continued for 3 or 4 more games, to be honest. And so I'm arguing between like what I wanted to happen and what they actually gave me. And I know I should be talking about what they actually gave me, but I feel like what they gave is almost like an admission of, we can't do anything else with that conceit, so here's the thing that we're going to give you. And I'm like, no, there's a lot of other cool stuff that you could do. Like, the first game was basically asking, and again, we have to speak of them. I think we have to speak of them like as in like almost like one kind of unit, because you can't play this third game really you won't appreciate the third game without actually playing the first two. So I keep referencing back the other two games for that reason. But like the first game asked a very intriguing question. What happens if you could change someone's memories before they die? And like that's a really cool idea. And then the second game asked, but what if those memories that you're changing aren't really valid to some degree? And so then it's like, okay, that's interesting. And so I feel like they made that one tweak for the second game. I feel like they could have continue to make smaller tweaks. But instead, what they do with the third game is they say, now, what if we tried to explain some stuff? And I won't go any further because it's spoiler territory. But like, what if we tried to explain some stuff? And I'm like, I don't need that. I don't care. And it took, a bit of that game before it opened up and said, this is what we're doing. And so I felt like that first part of the game was almost like it was a lie, and it was like not really like I got invested in something and then I'm told no. And so I don't know, it was a little weird. So it's definitely my least favorite of the three. I still think it's a very good story. It's a good piece of that universe, of that Mooniverse. Mm-hmm. But it just kind of it failed for me in a few ways. So
and that was his positive take. So stay tuned for the spoilers.
All right. Well,
hit us with it, buddy.
I think that I probably enjoyed this game more than any of you. Personally, it's for a couple reasons. So we didn't touch on it yet, but I'm interested to hear you guys' thoughts. I thought that the visual storytelling in this game is superb. More so than they really got it right in this one. There were times when there are screenshots of things, right, where your character is walking and seeing different things, and we'll go into more of it later, but no written words, nothing. And it's just, exactly what's happening without reading a thing for 5 minutes at a time sometimes, right? And I thought that was, I don't know, beautiful in a way, right? Like that they were able to do that so well without telling you anything. You knew what was happening. A big part of it.
I 100% agree with that. One of the first things I said when we finished, not exactly to what you're saying around like some of the like scenes with pictures and stuff, but one of the first things I said to my partner is, man, they have gotten so good at like expressing emotion with the most subtle like little motions. Like these are little Super Nintendo RPG style characters, and there's so many like little shrugs of a shoulder, or like just like a movement of an arm, or especially like a shifting of their eyes, and you know exactly what they're going for without a word being said. So I 100% agree with you, and it was, I mean, that's been true across the whole series, but it was definitely on like full display here in this one.
Yes, and that is actually what I was going to say next. As more than just the pictures, right? That part of the visual storytelling, the facial expressions have gotten insanely good, like you were saying, Steve. Yeah. With like 7 little pixels next to each other on a face, they can show you exactly how that character is feeling. It's just like it's everything you wanted Final Fantasy VI to be able to show you in that story when you played it back in '94, right? It's not the same kind of game, but the sprites are very similar, and they can do similar things. And the shifting of eyes, the blushing, like it's insane what they can do. And then we didn't touch on it, but we usually do. Music is incredible. I think music is incredible for all these games, but the music was absolutely incredible and fit the story perfectly, no matter where it was. It's just like you were engrossed in it, like you were watching a film, right? It sucked you into whatever was going on. And then most of all, and that's why I was interested to hear what Caleb had to say, because it resonated a lot with me because of the story that we will get to in the spoiler section resonated more with me than I think either of the first 2 games. I think that I would go ahead, Steve. Sorry.
I didn't mean to cut you off. I was going to say they're the same for me. Like when we get into the story, like there are things happening in this game that like are literal conversations that I have had in my life within the last like few weeks.
Right.
It's wild how much of this I was like, wow. damn, I could not have played this game at a better time.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
I suspect, knowing you and your lot in life, I suspect I understand where you're going from there, and I agree.
Yeah. So the story struck, a chord with me, I suppose. Honestly, the ranking is tough for me. I really love all the games. I think that I might slot this in the middle, actually, in front of Finding Paradise and To the Moon. I think that it's really hard for Gao and Freebird to capture the To the Moon experience because we've all gone through it now. Now we're looking for things, right? And we're like, you're not gonna get me this time. Whereas when we played To the Moon, it was like, whoa, like this. When you play that, if you are not spoiled, you are like, whoa, you can't, like, unless you're very observative, like Leah is apparently, or whatever, in To the Moon, and figure it out before it happens. But you're always looking for the spoiler and trying to find things that are gonna be coming. And I still think this game did an excellent job. I was still caught with my pants down at points, right? But you're trying to figure it out.
Everybody's getting touched,
Yeah.
it sounds like. I'll say too, like the way you kind of explained that, and you broke it down, the reason you like this, like the story was so good, and that kind of, and just from that very particular lens, I think that makes a lot of sense, because it helped me sort of understand maybe why I preferred the other two games so much more. And I think it is because my dumb brain was just so like impressed with the clever fireworks of the first two games. Like, it's just, there's this clever like Rube Goldberg mechanism kind of working in the background, and that sort of thing just sparked my brain in a way that like I kind of ignored the rest of it. I was like, this is cool. I like the way this is working. I like the way that this piece is fitting in with this piece. That's really, really cool. And I think probably when I went to Imposter Factory, I was so primed to look for that and be in love with that I sort of forgot there was a story there. And so the whole time I'm like, yeah, where's the next cool like piece that's going to fit in there? Which is weird considering how much we talked about earlier that I love What Remains of Edith Finch, and I'm a big story guy, and I love story. It makes me think that if this were the first game of the three that I had played, even though we've all determined like you shouldn't do that, but if it was, would I actually have the reverse where I now would be playing the other two games looking for this really cool story and sort of being angry about all the cool, clever fireworks, right. It's interesting how different they are in that way.
I think your experience is very different than any of ours, Caleb, because you smoked the whole pack in like a month, right? Or 2 months.
That's true.
So you have that very recent experience, recency bias or whatever of those other two games, whereas I haven't played those other two games since, months ago, and then the other one was months before that. I'm not like beelining straight through them, right? So that could have impacted a little bit. I'm not sure, but I think I appreciated. I was also, like Josh said, and everybody who mentioned it, looking for ways that it was connected to the other two games. But then I honestly, after half an hour, stopped caring about looking for that stuff. I was just engrossed in it. So yeah, that's all for me.
Awesome. Yeah, I think my ratings or rankings would be 2, 1, 3. So Finding Paradise, To the Moon, and then this one. Just from what I said before. So I mean, if you guys want to shout out what your rankings would be, that'd be cool. But yeah, that's pretty much where I'm landing. But that does not mean that I did not enjoy this game, and it would be a main quest game for me too. So
yeah, mine are the exact same as yours. I'd say 2, 1, 3, but it's in for a penny, in for a pound, right?
Yeah.
If you played the first one and you liked the first one, I mean, there's no reason to not play the other two.
I'm on board for the train. I'm in the Mooniverse. Let's go down Moon Mountain. Caleb, where you
just know the third one's different.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Where are you landing on it with your rankings here, or can you rank it since you kind of like put them all together here in your head?
Yeah, I'll play ball and do the ranking thing. I'd say 1, 2, 3 probably for me.
Okay.
And 3 would be a pretty distant 3, unfortunately. Yeah.
Actually, you know what? Why are we having him rank them? Caleb, where'd they show up on your list? on your grand list of 261?
Oh yeah, let me. Actually, I do have them on there. Let's pull this up. Do you guys want to guess? Do you want to have any sort of guess where they might be?
Yes. If I was going to guess, I would say To the Moon is 63. Finding Paradise is 121, and Imposter Factory is 240.
Wow, that would be really low.
No, the spread is not quite that far. However, they do start quite a bit later than 65 or whatever. So I have To the Moon is at 123. And then I have Finding Paradise, because I played it right afterwards, and I consider them very similar, at 124. You'll find a lot of the sequels are kind of grouped together because they are the same game in a lot of ways. So yeah, 123, 124. And then Finding Imposter Factory is 155. Just higher than Shadow Complex Remastered. Very, very similar games. And just after Oceanhorn, Monster of Uncharted Seas. It's a great game.
Interesting.
Yeah,
never put it below Oceanhorn, but okay.
Do you want to hear what To the Moon barely beat, or To the Moon lost to Journey to the Savage Planet?
Oh, I really want to play that.
Yeah, but those two games barely beat out The Gunk.
So, get out of here, Gunk. We don't need you.
Get out of here, Gunk.
Yep. And I bet if I allowed myself to reorganize things, I bet if I went back and played The Gunk, it would go higher in my list because I think fondly of that game. So, yeah. Anyway, there you go.
Nice.
So I think we're ready to deep dive into spoilers. Take the gloves off, and just get all those inappropriate feelings in, I guess, because that's basically how the theme of what I say today is, I guess. So anything you guys want to say before we jump into like spoilers? I think we all pretty much like, if you like these games, continue playing them, right? That's where we're all kind of like at right now, for sure. Cool.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, I don't want to speak for you, dear listener, but I have to imagine that anyone that's listening to this, the third of a breakdown in this series of games podcast episode, has either played them already or has made the decision they're not going to play any of them and just want to hear our thoughts.
Yeah.
But if you are the one random person out there that played the first two and are waffling on the third, go play it.
Yeah.
You know what? It's close enough to the other two in many ways that it'll at least feel familiar, and then you can form your own opinion from there.
Yeah, and it's a pretty short game. It's 4 hours, so.
Yeah.
All right, so 3, 2, 1, it's spoiler time. Can you guys believe that Chester Cheetah was in the game? I can't believe it.
And as a main character too, like he has
it was a weird
prominent role.
There is like the, what do they call it, the slinky, the long cat or whatever. That's kind of a Chester Cheetah.
Yeah, that's
Rice Spot.
Do you think that was a nod? Was that a nod to Undertale, you think?
Yeah, I think so.
I've never played
yeah.
Undertale.
Okay.
Maybe.
Okay.
Oh, you should play it.
There was one of the songs that played during the game actually, like melodically, was very similar to one of the main themes in Undertale. It was very much like down, 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 but like with one note change, to the point where after the game ended, I took a shower right after, and I was humming Undertale music
Yeah,
to
that
myself,
much,
and
huh?
I was like,
Smoking a cigarette. Took a shower.
I was like, literally look over to Leah. Is that good for you too?
I got it all over me. Oh, let me get a shower real quick.
All right.
Actually, speaking of the music, since we usually just go in every direction that we feel like, and Steve already mentioned it, and we were talking about Undertale, did you guys, when you first saw the underground lab, that music was like, I actually made a note. I'm like, this is straight up 007 music. It seemed like,
Oh yeah.
yeah.
Yep.
Good.
It was non-copyright
Seriously.
infringing golden.
I'm like,
Lady.
wow. It's like, yep, that's crazy.
It was like they took music directly out of the N64 game or something and replaced like one note with a Mario paint, like cat meow, and they're like,
Exactly.
doesn't break any laws.
What's interesting about that concept though is I try to like I'm trying to like break down like maybe there was an intention behind it, right? And, like because the first two games were the music was so good that it's obviously not just laziness for the third one. But I wonder if it wasn't just to evoke those similar feelings like James Bond and that sort of thing, but if it was also kind of playing on that whole idea of like a multiverse, like why couldn't a version of this song exist in this particular version fracture? It's probably not what they were going for, just because that Sam sounds up its own butt, and this game isn't quite there yet. But yeah, that's what I was kind of wondering. It's like maybe that's like a nod, like maybe, and that's also would explain like the Undertale cat instead of a dog, it's a cat. Why? It's a different universe.
Well, I was gonna ask, did you guys think or miss the song at the end not having lyrics? Did you like just the piano over the ending there, the piano music? Because the other two have like a song with lyrics. I've noticed that was absent from this game.
I didn't even really notice that
Mm-hmm.
at the time. Like, I mean, I obviously noticed it didn't have lyrics, but as with the other games, I was just like, man, more good music in these credits.
Yeah,
Thank
I mean,
you.
it was a fantastic song, and like it really suited the theme of the game and everything. I was just curious if you guys noticed that like omission. Like usually there's like they have just chiptune style music throughout the entire game, and then there's like this or like more orchestrated with singing and everything. Right. Just like a theme song type song at the end, but they didn't do that for this one. It's just a really nice, beautiful piano piece, which suited the story, I think. So
yeah,
I was just curious.
Yeah, I didn't honestly notice that at the time, but I did notice in the ending, and I'm assuming the rest of you did too. And Josh, you kind of alluded to it earlier, and we're in spoiler section, so I was not I was not watching the credits through teary eyes for this one. It just didn't have that same ending impact. I obviously ranked it where I did differently than you guys, so I think there are other parts of the story that did a good job of making me feel emotion, right? But it wasn't the ending. The ending was good, but it wasn't To the Moon or Finding Paradise, where Kan Gao has you by the balls and just knows exactly when to yank. Like it wasn't that.
Never is the when to yank. Never.
Metaphorically, Caleb.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, the part that actually got me was just like the him trying to woo Linry and like doing the like setting up like the sights of the world, since she can't see the sights of the world. That was very touching to me. I actually started choking up on that part. And then when they actually went and saw those real sights, and like it was beautiful, like hand painted like vistas and things inside the game, that touched me just as much as the first part when they did the quote unquote fake version of that. So yeah, there's parts in this game that did get me teary eyed and choked up. So I mean, I'm not saying that it didn't do that to me. It's just that it didn't have the you're just building up to this ending that's going to make you cry a bunch of tears, So.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, the structure of the game leads into that, right? Like, because this is not following the same format as the other two, it can't build up to like this sweeping piano moment where you hear the flat line of the person finally like passing on. Like, it's just it could never be that same thing. I don't think during this one I ever had a point that I cried, unlike the other two where I definitely did. There were parts where I choked up, kind of like you, Josh. I almost feel like that's more that I've just been conditioned to do it in these games. Like, it's like Pavlov's piano.
That's awesome.
Even in scenes that are not like particularly emotional, it's like, I know I'm playing one of these Kan Gao games, I'm gonna get emotional, right? My body just starts going through the motions. So it still hit to a degree, but I think I was bringing myself there as much as the game was bringing me there. But yeah, that's like the strength and a weakness of the game, is that it is very much not trying to build you up to crying for 5 minutes during the credits like the other ones are.
I think it was different from the other ones in that it had me very emotional, not very like the other games at the end, but teetering right throughout. And like I mentioned when I said there's a reason why with the story and everything, I think that it probably hits someone who has gone through a similar experience. The whole, not even like Linry and Quincy did, but being a parent. That's why I said to you in our chat, Steve, I'm like, I think you should play this with Leah if you haven't already, because it's just, if you're going through something like that, it really hits hard. You really understand, like, wow, like you put yourself in those characters' shoes, like when everything's going down and she was never really, probably didn't want to get pregnant because of her complications, and they knew that it was going to be a tough pregnancy, and then the choice comes up, and it's like I seriously had to like step away from the game for a minute. I was like, I didn't have anything else to do. I was just like, I just need to go clear my head for a minute, because that's serious stuff. Like, this game seemed much darker in so many ways than the other two. And I mean, first of all, starting off with a massive amount of blood and murder all over this mansion. You don't know what the heck's going on. It's just like straight up massacre from the get-go, and then into the story.
This one didn't start with a squirrel death or a near squirrel death, though, right?
Yes.
That was a little different.
Thank
you. Should we go around the room, like, see what choice you made for that decision in the game?
Oh,
we can.
Like, you know what I mean? Like that there was that one choice where you had to choose.
Yeah, that's one of the very few dialogue choices, right, in the game.
Yeah.
I guess I didn't know.
Wait, which choice are we talking about? Between Linry and the kid?
I think exactly.
Do we choose? Did we choose that? Was that an actual dialogue choice for us?
Yeah, I mean, unless I just assumed it was, but I remember like thinking, like, what should I choose?
I don't remember it being a toggleable choice either. Same as Steve, but if it was, it doesn't. I went total Linry on that one. I'll be honest. Like, yeah. I mean, it's like, and it's probably a lot because we started with this spacey girl that we didn't know what she was doing in this mansion, and she's zapping all over the place. But you grow to understand her character and learn about her so much, where once you get 2.5 hours into it, you're like, I don't want Linry to die. Like, come on.
Yeah.
So
so that's my choice as well. Is that where you went, Caleb? Or
yeah, that's where I went too. So maybe it wasn't a choice. Maybe it was actually said for us. But I swear I thought I remember thinking it was a choice. But even if it was, I would have went Linry as well. I just kind of, in those kinds of choices, there's that sort of romanticized noble version of I'll give my life for someone else sort of thing. But I think the practicality is like Linry's a known quantity. Like, her history is already has already impacted people and has a current impact on people, whereas the child, it's to put it harshly, is kind of an unknown. Right. And so in this case, I go with the known rather than the unknown. If that was a real life choice, would it be different? I don't know. But in the game context, it was a pretty easy choice, I think, to make. Yeah. If it was in fact a choice.
I will say that I'm not complaining or knocking it, but I did think it was funny that during that scene where the doctor's like describing this terrible situation, like, yep, you're gonna have to make this horrible choice, sucks, you're gonna have to make it, in the middle of that, some other doctor or nurse comes running in and they're like, doctor, we need you in room 5 stat. And it's like in no world would this doctor be delivering like the hardest news these people will ever hear, and someone cuts in and they're like, we need you over in the OR, let's go, buddy.
There's a jar of pickles that need to be opened and none of us can do it.
You got to see how high this house of cards that Jason built in the break room is.
I will say that once we learn what happens when we go choose baby, it's you look back on it, and I don't know if we even really want to get. That's like the spoileriest spoiler, right? But makes you think about it, right? Now that I know who that baby will become, I also want Neil, obviously, right? Like, Neil is got to be one of the favorite characters of many, right, in this series. So yeah, you want Neil. So yeah, I mean, it's just kind of wild. And honestly, that was that was the big reveal that just completely shook me to my core. I was like, this is just, I have totally forgotten about Sigmund. I've totally forgotten about Neil and Ava. I'm not even thinking about it anymore. And then they name their son, and son has complications and everything. I can't even remember what the original.
Tobias.
Toby.
Toby.
Yeah.
Tobias.
Yeah.
And then you find out that everything changes in the other, like, and it makes sense. And they're like, well, what about Watts? I'm like, what? Well, but Toby doesn't go with Watts. How about Neil? Like, oh my God. Like, that was so good.
Yeah.
Okay, I gotta say, you threw shade at her before about To the Moon, but I kid you not, at the first hour of the game, I don't know where she got this from. Leah was like, did they ever tell us Landry's last name? And I was like, I don't think so. And she was basically just like,
Oh, wow.
And then when it came back up as a like plot reveal 2 hours later, I was like, what are you doing? Did you, what? Have you played this game before?
And
oh
Leah,
my God.
Leah, go ahead,
I was gonna say, surprisingly, I was very similar. I think if Leah and I ever watched movies together, we would either become best friends or we would hate each other, because I am definitely the person within 20 minutes of most movies, I'm like, this is how it's going to end. I think it's probably based on just like writing and degree writing and stuff. But like, this is how it's going to end. And so my wife hates watching movies with me. But in this particular case, I was like, okay, I know it's part of the other two, like it's part of a whole. Mm-hmm. So something in here will tie back to that. So now all I just have to be just on the lookout for the something. And the fact that we didn't know who Quincy was, we didn't know who Linry was, and then like I'm like, okay, but they have to be related or connected somehow to these other two people. Otherwise, why would we end up caring about these two people? These couldn't be completely divorced strangers from those people we've already met. There has to be a connection somehow. And so you get to sense that they start to fall for each other, and like, okay, I don't know if I ever made the leap specifically to like they are going to have a kid that will become this person, but as soon as they had a kid or got pregnant, I was like, wait, she's into brain stuff, and this kid has medical complications, which like the trope is that like if you have a medical complication, you're probably going to be a book person because you can't move or be physical. I'm like, something's there. Now I won't go far. I won't pat myself on the back and say that like I can tell exactly what's going on. But I was like, this kid is involved in there somewhere. Maybe he's the Sigmund who becomes Sigmund Court or something like that. But yeah,
my initial thought was that Linry, through much like most of the beginning of the game, like very beginning of the game, I thought that Linry created Sigmund or took the ideas of these, because the people, you and Hayes or Haynes or something, whatever the doctors' names were that owned the mansion, there was nothing about Sigmund. So I figured that she took those ideas and created Sigmund, and that's how it was going to tie back in. Well, it isn't that. It's that technology is taken, right? And Neil takes it and does, or goes and is able to use that technology at an outside party, right? And that's... So it does tie back, but yeah.
And I think one of the reasons, since we're getting to the point where we're talking a little bit about like the end of the game and that sort of thing, I think one of the reasons, and this is where I'll be a little bit, because we're in the spoiler territory and I alluded to it earlier, that I might discuss some of my qualms with the game based on that. I think where the game, I think, ultimately kind of fell off for me is in that last sort of act when things get a little bit like magical and get a little bit like like a monster kind of, I don't know the exact word for it, but basically things take on a supernatural aspect that I feel like the games previously had staunchly and very defiantly said, we can do better than that. Like in the previous two games, it was like there was still some science to everything that was happening. Now, it might not be science that we fully understand, or it might not be science that could feasibly even work, but it was still a science that sort of the game was saying like, hey, you don't get it, but trust us. This makes sense. But then toward the end of Imposter Factory, when like Linry's like future kind of, or I guess ultimate self or whatever, kind of breaks the machine and then explains all the metaversey stuff, and I was like, wait, but the previous game set up a promise that wouldn't happen, and I was kind of really like deflated by that, and I was a little bit kind of like, bleh. And also I felt like it, and this also ties into, I think, when I was saying earlier that one of the reasons I like the other two games is because there's sort of that puzzle aspect of it. You know, when you sort of hearken in the supernatural element, it's sort of it's like, well, now the puzzle doesn't matter. You're just going to explain it away because of crazy supernatural stuff. And I think they did an okay job of still trying to make it seem plausible and reasonable about why things are happening the way they were. But I didn't care at that point. I was already kind of checked out. I think that's what it did it for me.
Yeah. It's interesting that you use the word supernatural. I would say there's like a couple ways to end a story that always feel very deflating. One of them is it was all a dream, and then one of them is like it was all just a simulation. And this one is very much that it was all just a simulation. Now it's like they invented a bunch of matrix rules about how these simulations work that end up looking supernatural because they're like, these simulations it exist within simulations and they're layered within each other in this way. And it's like my brain kind of just like flattened all that down and like didn't worry so much about the specifics of it, because even though it did come to it, this was all a simulation. It was to a purpose, right? It was to teach. It was to like show us. I think they're just trying to give us the like conclusion to Neil's story. Like this is sort of how he ends up in the end, and this is like what he was working towards. There's a little bit of an explanation of like this is why he was taking pills throughout his life, things like that. I will say, if I'm going to like wag my finger at this game a little bit, it feels like at the very end they're kind of trying to be like, yeah, now you understand Neil's motivation as a character. It's even so far as like during the credits, it shows you that this is episode X. It doesn't say episode 3. Like they're very consciously saying like this, you don't know where in the timeline of To the Moon this falls. This is just, probably out at the end somewhere. And so it felt like, okay, they're kind of wrapping Neil's thing up. I can get down with that. And then they do like one, like just sort of like obligatory, like, but is something spooky happening? Right. You don't even know.
Isn't that character Faye from Imposter Factory like the AI Faye that they like that he like took and maybe Faye is real now? Is that basically the implication there?
We knew and we know this at least comes after Imposter Factory or after Finding Paradise, because Neil captures Faye, and we don't really understand why he does it, but he sees that she could have a purpose in his grand plan that he's already got going on, and he's hiding this machine from everyone, right? And we don't really know what that machine is. So I think that kind of Imposter Factory kind of explains what that machine is to Neil, why he is harboring it in his house or whatever, and why he took Faye and inserted her as like a God sentient type thing in his, because I believe he wants his mom and dad to be able to live the best life that they could have, right? So there's millions of simulations to try to get that narrowed down. So I think that kind of explains it. I am going to pat myself on the back, because my second note I took, I wrote Matrix ? So
yeah, there you go.
To be fair, every piece of paper someone puts in your hand, you write Matrix ? On.
So. Finally, it worked out.
Yeah, this was the universe in which all of that coalesced.
Finally got it.
Yes. Sense.
After so many horrible interactions at the DMV where they're like, "Just sign your name."
I finally could take my tin hat off, and
but yeah, so at the very end. I honestly, I'm curious to hear your interpretations of the very end, when like, because the way that he talks with them and they go out to get ice cream, he leaves the door open. He's obviously not being secretive really at this point anymore. Like it's more open, and then like the door slams in a spooky, ominous way, and the vibe seems to be like there's a little bit of like visual implication that like this is also part of simulation world, or I don't know what it is, or they're implying that Faye like has agency in the real world now, or they're implying that there's a ghost in the apartment. I don't really know. What did you guys think?
Well, I think that's the problem with using the eternal or infinite multiverses thing, is that it doesn't matter what they do at the end. It being a simulation is a possibility all the time. So like, what can you actually have faith in at all? Like, what can you actually believe is real? Because they've already told us nothing is real. There is no real, and what you thought was real turns out it wasn't. So it doesn't. I don't know. I don't have a concrete answer to you because I just don't know what happened, and honestly, I don't think the game isn't asking me to try to figure it out in a way that makes me want to kind of figure it out. It's just like, yeah, it's probably a simulation. Nothing you can do about
it's
it.
like the holodeck situation from Star Trek, right? Like there's the whole episode. I don't know if you guys watch Star Trek, but there's a whole episode where at the end you find out the holodeck and everything outside the ship is actually in the holodeck, like the simulation within the simulation type of situation. Yeah. So that's just what came to mind.
The whole movie The Grinch took place in a snow globe. That type of thing.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah. In black, we're all in a marble.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm.
To kind of turn that point on its head, like, well, it's not real. So I kind of like really took to heart. I think Quincy says it to Linry because Linry was feeling the same way. She was feeling very down about it. Like, why even do this? We know it's not real. And Quincy's like, does it really matter? Like, let's go experience this best life. And then she's like, yeah, you're right. And they did, and they lived their entire life. No weird existential crisis. They knew Faye was coming at the end, right? So that's why, to me, yeah, okay, it might not be real, but it was real enough to them, right? So that was my
Yeah.
That
makes sense. And if you consider the first two games are specifically designed to fake a reality that is satisfying, then why not let that happen to these characters as well?
So yeah, the ultimate goal still ended up happening, just in a very different and unique way. So I mean, it's just like they took some chances, I would say, with this game. But like you said, like it hit us all differently, which is a good thing. I think when you're trying to do a story like this, you're trying to try something new, which obviously they had that mold, and they were trying to do something a little different than the other two games, and kind of tie it all in together. And I think that it's varying degrees of success, obviously, but I think that I'm glad they took the swing with this game.
Yeah, I agree. Touching back, we were talking about some visual storytelling, but some of it would have been spoiler territory. And Steve was talking about shifty eyes and stuff like that. One of my favorite parts, and I made sure to make a note of it, was when Linry and Quincy first meet, like in the study hall, lab, library, wherever they're at, right? And they're kind of talking, and they're both sitting. He intentionally sits next to her after a few of their times meeting, and there is a very specific point where Linry's talking, and Quincy's character, his little sprite, noticeably leans back in his chair and like tilts his head back to check out Linry. And I was just like, that is fantastic. Like, how do you get that out of, because she's like very, very into her stuff, and that Quincy starts to like her. So then he's just kind of like leans back and checks her out. It's like these little
awesome.
These little sprites. It's insane how far they came from the first game. So yeah.
I mean, if I'm gonna just pick one of my favorite moments of that, it's not even a moment. It happens a lot, but he does a very convincing, like both hands on the side of his head, like whoa, like when he finds out they're pregnant and stuff. I something about the very specific way that is animated. I'm like, man, you can feel that dude's excitement in whatever this scene is, or that dude's shock.
Yep. And then during the bad news part, right, when they're talking about what they should do with the pregnancy, and Quincy's just like slumped over next to the bed, right, leaning against the bed, and just like you can just tell he's feeling it. And it's just like, wow, like it's just insane amount of emotion that can come through these little RPG Maker sprites. Like it's wild. So
yeah,
I do wonder if either Kangao or someone that worked on this game like had recently gone through a pregnancy, or just like they mapped the right scenes at the right times, because it felt very genuine. Like, again, like being weeks away from my kid being born, like seeing the boom boom boom, like the 5 or 6 scenes that they choose to show this pregnancy over time. It's like, this is exactly the type of conversations they'd be having at the exact right at these times, and like this is exactly what would be going on. I was like, this is very well done.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I definitely hope that is the case. Not hoping that the creator of the game had complicated pregnancy, but I'm hoping that, like, I love a piece of art or a video game specifically, like, that comes from a personal place. I think you can really tell that. And I think video games are like an untapped medium for like memoir almost. Like they're becoming more and more popular, of course. Even What Remains of Edith Finch is somewhat loosely based on some events in Ian Dallas's life. But the idea that like I have this thing that I want to that they can effectively communicate an emotion from themselves to you, to the player, in this kind of way is really, really, really intriguing. Like if the creator was just actually really good at empathy and writing, it would almost be like, dang it, I wanted this to be like a personal story. Crap. Even though the end product is still the same. That's just how my weird brain works. Is I like knowing the role, or I at least like believing that there is a role that the creator has put themselves into their work to some degree.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with that. Oh, so, I mean, I talked about it in the non-spoiler section, but I'm curious, did any of you feel the loss of the puzzly segments or anything like that? Like, did you feel like the game was clipping along too fast, or were you all on board with the pace of it? Because, again, I feel like it was the best. Just pacing exclusively, ignoring other details, I feel like is the best the games have been.
No, I mean,
Yeah,
go ahead, Josh. Sorry.
Mm-hmm. No, you're good. No, I agree. I commented on that too, but I think that it being more of just this is the story you're experiencing is nice. Like I enjoyed being told a story and having. I mean, it's like a walking simulator, right? You're walking through, just experiencing things. But it's a very unique art style, unique music. Everything is, very like to the moon, right? Yeah, that's the only way to describe it, I guess. But yeah, I thought it was better without the. All right, we're gonna tell you this huge dump of like emotional storytelling, and then hey, go do some sliding puzzles for a little bit. All right, now we're gonna do another huge So it was nice to just have the story and experience it like that, I think.
I'm wondering, did you guys miss even being able to adventure around a room and having like to? It's not really a puzzle, right? All you got to do is go click on stuff. But did you guys miss that portion? Because everything was streamlined to a point where you almost got the memory orbs just by walking in this one, right? Did anyone miss like going and clicking on a teddy bear to get the next thing?
I did, but I think it's because, as I said earlier, like I was so primed to look for interesting, clever fireworks that I was like, I was kind of disappointed when I was being pushed along. Like in my notes, I actually mentioned how weird it was that the memory orbs you'd collect all these memories, these memory orbs, and then you'd sort of, I guess, mash them into a door to unlock the door. I don't know exactly the how that was happening mechanically in world, but in this particular case, those doors were kind of just waypoints. Whereas in the previous games, those doors were like portals to another memory. And in this way, it didn't really feel like they almost felt arbitrary. It's like, why even have them there if you're just going to go from left to right anyway? But I totally understand and concede that like I'm kind of in the minority of that. I kind of did miss the mini puzzles a little bit.
The one thing that maybe I missed is just the environments were a lot smaller in this one. Like it was a lot of just like you were standing in a bedroom or in a living room, whereas the other games, especially To the Moon, you'd be like at like a carnival or like in kind of like a neighborhood block or something like that sometimes. And so I think the rooms being a little more enclosed adds to the feeling that people might have of like it just kept pushing you along and didn't give you time to stop and think.
Right.
There was like never a time to like look around. There was almost never a time where you, outside of like a few locations like the lab, most of the time it was like a single screen endeavor. Like the boundaries of where you could explore were visible on the screen. So it was very much like the clicking is like a formality at this point, which I was fine with, but I can see how it would throw people off.
Yeah, I mean, it's like in To the Moon, there's the classroom, right? And then you go to find, and you like experience a classroom. You're walking through all the rooms. There's like 7-8 rooms, branching off. And then you go to Finding Paradise. It's that same classroom, just a little different. And you're like, oh yeah, I actually remember being in this classroom, and it has that sense of place. I feel like maybe it loses a little bit of that sense of place because you don't get to explore around. You know what I mean?
I decided maybe even early on that I was going to play devil's advocate because I thought that maybe you guys would have certain feelings, but I thought that some of that not being able to adventure as much was actually kind of cool because it was as condensed as it needed to be because that's what Linry experienced. And we know that Linry's head was basically in a book for her entire life. She was very goal oriented. She wanted to do one thing. She didn't even notice what was like in her peripherals, right? For a lot of her life. And one specific scene that I thought did a really good job of like only showing us what she remembered because we're going through her memories. I know sometimes we get in these games like, I want to go talk to this person. Well, sometimes you go try to talk to those people and they have nothing to say because Linry never heard what they said. One of my favorite parts that I didn't think that you guys could remind me, I might be forgetting, but the ambulance where she gets picked up and you end up going through the door and everything's dark and all you can see is the blue and the red because Linry is unconscious in the ambulance and that's all she sees until you finally get to the hospital and she wakes up. I thought that was awesome because, yeah.
That is cool.
So.
Yeah, that frames the game differently. That's a good perspective to have. I didn't actually take that into consideration because we are going through her mind, so that does make a lot of sense. Yeah. And like whenever she has experiences with Quincy, it does open up a bit. If you think about it, like the trash dioramas of the different places, that's actually a bigger environment because she's like more present during that time. And then when she's like going on the trips, I feel like I alluded to that already, but it's like a huge painterly thing because this is like a huge prime memory for her, like a core memory, So yeah, that makes sense.
I felt like there was a lot more shadowy people in this game, and you could say like, well, they just didn't feel like figuring out more characters to talk to. But Linry's life goal was it was almost a good way of being selfish, right? She knew she didn't have much time and she was focused on herself. So you see how many characters? You see Quincy, her parents, and then the people in the mansion. And that's it. Because that's in my mind, or the way that I viewed the story, that's all she cared about. She didn't know if she was going to live to tomorrow, and that was her life. So yeah, I mean, it very much could have been a cop out by them. And maybe, but to me, they at least made it fit well. So,
Nice.
Do you think in the next game, whenever that 2027, whenever that is, this is the problem with us being caught up now.
Seriously,
the wait begins. Do you think in the next game they will sort of like follow this one up and launch into new stories, new events, like kick off another set of plot lines, or do you think that they will go back and continue to address the in-between time between Finding Paradise and this one? Because there are some things from Finding Paradise that we never got resolved, right? Like, I can't remember at this point. Caleb, maybe you remember because you just played it like yesterday. But there's like the whole thread in Finding Paradise where, what's the doctor? Or, Roxy? Where she's kind of like, sort of like telling Neil, like, I know what you're up to, bro. You're gonna work with me on this, and that's, as far as I remember, that was never addressed in the game, and it was never touched on in this one either. So presumably, there's more to their relationship that will be explored at some point.
Yeah, they actually announced they're making an episode. Like there's one that, I mean, of course, like you said, it's maybe a year or two out, but it's called Just a To the Moon Series Beach Episode. And it says the beach episode of episode 1 To the Moon, episode 2 Finding Paradise, and episode 3 X Imposter Factory. Or is it? Yes, it is, sadly. That's the description. So it's very vague. And there's some screenshots of like them on the beach and stuff. Neil and what's her name? His girlfriend or partner? Ava. Yeah, Ava. Yeah. So it's just some screenshot of them on a beach, and it looks like they're paragliding. So that could be something. I don't know. But that's the next thing they're working on. So.
What you said, Steve, made me. I had a question. I guess that when you were talking about the relationship between the two, I guess I didn't fully understand at the end of Imposter Factory. So is it Roxanne? Is that what it is? Roxanne and Neil?
Roxy's like
Roxy's
Bubbly.
the bubbly
No, the
character,
bubbly one,
from
yeah.
Okay, no, so I'm
Finding
thinking
Paradise.
Rosalind or what the other doctor.
Mhm.
Like, I don't know if I miscaught it, but it seemed like that are Neil and that other doctor like in a relationship, or
In the first two games, I think that they'd only ever said like they had a history, like it was. They joked around as if they've had some relationship in the past, but it was never spelled out that they were or are in a relationship. And I think that this is basically confirming that. Like, it was saying, like, yeah, in the past they had been together, or in this version of Neil's timeline, then they were together.
Right.
The way I took it was Neil was working on some machine. And Roxy knew about it, right? And said, you have to do this with me. And we saw Neil, or we inferred that Neil put Faye into that machine. So that machine is what is in Neil's apartment right now, which is what had his parents in it, right? I don't know how it was. Beyond that, I don't know how it was resolved, but I think that machine at the end of Finding Paradise is the same one that Neil was keeping for his parents.
I think you're right, yeah. And I might even just be misremembering it, but in my head, Roxy had it felt like Roxy had more of a selfish motivation to like attaching herself to Neil's project that I felt like would ultimately come to a head. It could have just been like she was calling him on it, being like, I want to be involved in the fun research you're doing, but and again, that is not the primary thread that people are going to care about in a sequel, but it is just representative of there is other stuff that they could explore. Even the relationship with, is it Ava or is it Rosalie?
Ava's the Neil's partner.
Okay, so Ava was barely in this game, and their relationship has always been kind of a standout. Yeah. So certainly there's more to explore with Ava too.
Yeah. I think, like, in terms of like, is there a relationship, or was there a relationship, or does Neil have feelings for Roxy? Neil puts a lot of his own self into his parents' reality, right? So I think that it showed us that Neil has
right spot is Neil.
Neil has feelings for Ava, very much, because he made himself get married to Ava, which is kind of weird, but at the same time, So I think that is a little bit of foreshadowing potentially, right? Neil obviously likes Ava in that way. So, but
yeah, they had a lovely wedding. It was just beautiful. Good, nice touch adding the little jellyfish in the trees, because the proposal took place in the jellyfish pond.
I didn't even notice that.
Yeah, I did.
Wow, that's crazy.
So what would you guys want them to do? I know you were mentioning there's places they could go, but what would you actually want them to do next? Them as in the developers.
My thought is they're going to do a huge series, right? All of this stuff is Ava on Neil's deathbed doing his memories. I feel like that's how this is all going to end, like after the whole series. And she's trying to give him his best version of his memories. Oh. That's what I think it is.
Wow.
That would be cool, but I don't know. But maybe not. That's my theory. But I don't know. I just want to see more. I think that they're going to keep on going with it, and I'm excited to see. Even if they just change the engine and decided, hey, we're going to do a first person to the moon game, I would play it. Like whatever they want to do next, I kind of just want to see what stories they come up with. Even if it is one that's a little more divisive, like this one was for us, we still liked it a lot. I just want to see like what they come up with. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, I would say what I want is I'm not that concerned about where it falls in the timeline or even what characters they explore. I would like them to take the best parts of this game, like the pacing and sort of just like the improved writing and just sort of the natural flow that this one has. And I would like them to then move away a little bit from simulation or like explaining all the rules of the universe and apply that to a story a little more consistent with their first two, that is more focused around like a character and their life. I like when there's a mix in of like the Sigmund Corp folks and their relationship, because it's good to have A plot, B plot going on. But I wouldn't want them to go any further in like explaining, like Inception style, how many layers deep we can go. Like, this is as far into that as I want to see.
I agree. Yeah, I it doesn't anything that comes out in this series, I guess I should say, besides like the very side stories. I haven't played, what's it called, Bird Story, right? Is that what that side story is called? I haven't played that yet. I should. It's an hour, and it would be a good little chunk of time to spend. But anything that comes out in the main series of this game, I'll play, even if it gets panned, because I just want to see, unless it is what it is, right? I think it's going to be a very big challenge for Kan Gao, and more power to them on the team at Freebird, because it's going to be very tough to continue to top this. They really did a good job with the first, at the very least, the very first game, and it's really hard to continue to top that and make the player have to continue to guess and still not be able to figure it out, right? So it's tough. I still will play whatever they put out, but that, I guess that's why maybe I'm looking at these games through rose-colored glasses after the first one and my enjoyment of it, and I don't see some of the detractions as much, because I know that must be very difficult to continue to top yourself when you made such a great game at the beginning. So
yeah, I have a lot of respect for them. For
Same.
Not doing the third application of this template again. Like, and I can imagine that that team doesn't want to do that again or forever either. Like, they want to do other things. It's been 12 years since To the Moon came out at this point. It's been a decade when Imposter Factory came out, so they probably don't want to live in that exact same format forever. I do hope they stick in this universe. I personally, and very selfishly, I like it when an author has like a rich enough vision for a universe that they feel like they could write stories within that universe for the rest of their life, even if they're in different, writing styles, different tones, etc. If there's just like enough richness to that world to keep writing in. So I would like to see more Mooniverse, but I'll follow them wherever direction they go, because I think that this was a very successful fork in the road.
Right.
And they could either follow this fork down, they could go down the original fork again, or they could do a third, and any of them would be successful or have a very high chance to be successful.
Yeah. How about you, Caleb? Answer your own question here. What would you like? How are you feeling having this all fresh in your head, all three of these?
Yeah, would you play another one?
Yeah.
After you hated this one?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm a template pervert, man. I'm opposite of you, Steve.
Yeah.
I would love 1,000 more of the first two game. Just like, I just want to say, like, this, those two same doctors going into just a different person's head and figuring the stuff out. I just want to like that's what I would love. Like, if they just released a new episode of that every 6 months, I'd be like, I could play those forever. Now that's not to say that I wouldn't, I wouldn't still want them to continue stretching their own, like, because they obviously have a really good grasp of this thing that they've made, and so I would trust anything else they would do, and I would probably still play anything else they do. But my preferred would just be, I'd like more of those mysteries, deathbed mysteries.
I'm for it.
Yeah.
Very optimistic to say every 6 months. They give them to you at about a rate of once every 5 years. So a little longer. You have about...
But now that they know that I want it,
exactly,
they're going to speed it along a little bit.
At this rate, we all have about 10 Mooniverse games left before we die. So let's hope they make the best of them.
All right. Well, I think we're kind of finding a natural conclusion. Anything else that sticks out from this game, Imposter Factory, that you guys want to shout out before we close it out here?
No, I think if you are a fan and you've made it this far through the spoilers and you still haven't played this game, if you're a fan of the first two and we didn't completely spoil you on everything, go play it. Because regardless of your feelings at the end, I think that we can all probably agree that this game is very much worth playing if you are into the to the moon universe, right? So,
The Mooniverse. The Mooniverse, yeah.
So.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right, well, I think that we didn't do plugs earlier, so let's just plug ourselves because it feels so good. I'm just going to steal Travis's line. Caleb, why don't you tell people where they can find you online and things that you're up to?
Yeah, so the two places I'm probably the most active, other than the Polykill Discord, of course, or Polymedia Discord, of course, is Twitter at Caleb J. Ross, all one word, the letter J, not like a word J, Caleb J. Ross. And I recently started a Substack, so calebjross.substack.com if you want just sort of blog type stuff. So I've been having a lot of fun over there, and hopefully it's not boring.
For dummies like me, what is Substack? What's the intention of that site?
It's basically like just a blogging platform.
Okay.
But it's specifically built in a way that makes subscribing to blogs really, really easy. It's probably something that had been done like in the 1.0 world of the web, and people are now thinking, oh, this is novel, and they're creating a new version of something that's existed for years. But yeah, it's basically that. It just makes it easy to subscribe and read, and it's just a really nice visual format, so it's easy to read on your phone, that sort of stuff.
Nice. Love it.
Mm-hmm. Well, you can find me on Twitter at Frantic Society, and you can find the network, polymedianetwork.com. You can subscribe to the Patreon, see all the cool shows out there like Tales of the Lesser Medium, like Caleb's on, and it's a really funny show. You should check that out. Steve, where can they find you on the internet?
Twitch and Twitter as Blinkum, OOMM like moon, comma to the. How about you,
You can
Seth?
find me at Captain Drachma on Twitter, and of course, as Caleb mentioned, in the Polymedia Discord, best place on the internet.
Best place on the internet.
Yeah. You can send us emails at IndieQuestPod@gmail.com or find us on Twitter at IndieQuestPod. And since we have a fantastic guest, how about you throw a nice kind word to our listeners here to close us out, Caleb?
Oh, wow, a kind word? I did not have this prepared. Oh, man.
First one all episode. Let's hear it.
Here's your kind word. You just did something great for yourself for the last hour and a half by listening to this amazing cast of characters. There. Good job, you.
Bye, guys.
Good job, you. Bye.